Well, greetings, everyone. Elvis is known for his rock and roll music, but I'll tell you what, when you listen to some of his gospel work, you'd be hard pressed to find anybody better. It's just absolutely fabulous what that man does. So anyway, let me get my slides up here, and we can go ahead and go on with the message. Sure got a lot of buttons here that I can click on. I don't really know which one's going to help you a lot. I guess I kind of got out of sequence here. Let's do the green one first, and then we'll click on this one, and then we'll click on that one, and then we'll click on that one. It's amazing how many hoops you got to jump through just to get to this. Okay, now that we've got all that out of the way, the title of my message is Finding the Good Soil. This is actually based on a parable of Jesus of the four soils. That's recorded in Matthew 13. You also find it in Mark and Luke, but I kind of like some of the things in Matthew 13, just slightly better, at least for this message. So that's one I'm going to give today. First, I'll just read the parable. And the parable says, Then he told them many things in parables, saying, A farmer went out to sow his seed. As he was scattering the seed, some fell along the path, and the birds came up and ate it. Some fell on rocky places where it did not have much soil. It sprang up quickly because the soil was shallow, but when the sun came up, the plants were scorched, and they withered because they had no root. Other seed fell among the thorns, which grew up and choked the plants. Still other seed fell on good soil, where it produced a crop, 160 or 30 times what was sown. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. That's an interesting statement, too. Just he who has ears to hear, let him hear. Some people apparently just can't hear. Anyway, Jesus then later, a few verses later, explains it in more detail privately to his disciples, and because they were wondering about what it meant. And I might want to add here about the parables, they're meant to be thought about and discussed. They're meant to be thought about for years. I know that what I understand in these parables has changed or developed or increased over the years. And I would suspect that if I were to read this again in another year or two, I would notice things in these parables that I haven't noticed this time. These are things that you remember the story, and they're supposed to puzzle you a little bit, and you're supposed to think, what on earth did Jesus mean? So their reaction isn't a bad one. The reaction of the disciples was a good one, actually. Like, what are you talking about? And so it gave Jesus a chance here to explain it a little bit. He said, Listen then to what the parable of the sower means. When anyone hears the message about the kingdom and does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches away what was sown in his heart. This is the seed sown along the path. The one who received the seed that fell on rocky places is the man who hears the word and at once receives it with joy. But since he has no root, he only lasts a short time. When trouble or persecution comes because of the word, he quickly falls away. The one who receives the seed that fell among the thorns is the man who hears the word, but the worries of this life and the deceitfulness of the wealth choke it, making it unfruitful. But the one who received the seed that fell on good soil is the man who hears the word and understands it. He produces a crop yielding 160 or 30 times what was sown. Now, let's just talk about this a little bit. I'm sure you've heard this taught before, unless you've never attended a church. But if you have, you've undoubtedly heard this parable. But let me ask you, does this parable frighten you? Do you look at those various places and is it like, uh-oh, I'm in trouble? Because do you identify with the seed sown on the path, the rut, the well-worn path of habit? Do you identify with that? Do you identify with the rocky places? Like, yeah, I give up too easy. I get all excited about something and in no time at all, I just don't keep it up. Or do you identify with the thorny places? Like, oh, I got so much going on. I've got so many troubles and so many problems that I just can't get anything good done. Or, well, do you identify with that? Or do you identify with the good soil producing an abundance? I would venture to say that most of us would identify actually with the first three, and probably think of ourselves as not very productive or even losers, um, because it appears that the last one appears to be the ultimate winner. So this can be a very discouraging parable if we don't really sit down and think about it and see what's actually going on. This parable should be actually quite encouraging, not discouraging. So let's go through a little bit more. Give you some ancient wisdom for a little bit of perspective here. When you look back at the book of Ecclesiastes, written by Solomon, what does the worker gain from his toil? He says, I have seen the burden God has laid on men. He has made everything beautiful in its time. Now, this one I've highlighted in red is the part that I want to focus on. He has also set eternity in the hearts of men, yet they cannot fathom what God has done from beginning to end. These ancients, like Solomon, recognize there's an unfathomable mystery, and we're in the middle of it as well. I'm sure that all of us long for life to keep on going. None of us like to be sick. I mean, when you listen to the number of things that were being prayed for in the beginning by Dale, uh, those a lot of those dealt with health-related issues. None of us wants to get sick. None of us wants to die because there's something in us that we want to live forever, and yet we don't understand what's going on. We just have trouble with it. So it's that unfathomable mystery. And like I said, we are in the middle of it as well as they were. Another one, there is a place of ultimate safety. A similar theme is echoed in the New Testament in Colossians 3 and verse 1. And he says, since then, you have been raised with Christ. Now that's true about all of us, because when he died, we died. And when he rose, we rose. Not just a few, but that happened to all of humanity. Since then, you have been raised with Christ. Set your hearts on things above, where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. Set your mind on things above, not on earthly things. And here's again what I want to highlight from these verses when we get back to the parable. For you died, and your life is now hidden with Christ in God. Interesting. Your life, my life, is now hidden with Christ in God. When Christ, who is your life, appears, then you also will appear with him in glory. Now, I believe our permanent eternal lives are presently hidden with Christ in God to keep us from damaging ourselves permanently. Now, if you're like me, you've probably done a lot of damage to yourself over the years. You made a lot of foolish mistakes, and probably even right now are living some things in our lifestyle that really aren't the best, and we're damaging ourselves. This is why Jesus has hidden our lives, our eternal lives, with Christ in God, and hidden them from us. Remember, right at the beginning of the book of the Bible, Genesis. Remember, God drove Adam and Eve from the garden lest they take of the tree of life and live forever. That was a protective action. It was not a punitive punishment, angry one. It was like he's protecting them and he's protecting us. God will not trust anyone, with the exception of Jesus, with your salvation, not even yourself. He will not trust you with your salvation. He's not going to trust me with my salvation. Why? Because he doesn't want it messed up. He considers your life and my life too precious for that risk. Oh, yes, we participate in with Jesus in it, but the actual act of saving us and keeping us safe, that's what he will do. Now let's go back to the original question. Where's the good soil? Again, we might identify more with the first three, and as we already went through. But I want to say and have us consider, and this was something that I didn't see until just a month or so ago, going through this parable again. The good soil is not where, it's who. Someone told me years ago, and I wished I remembered who it was that told me this, but it's one of those memorable statements. That person said, if we make anybody other than Jesus the hero of the Bible, we've probably misinterpreted the story. Read that again. If we make anybody other than Jesus the hero of the Bible, we've probably misinterpreted the story. Now, let's go back to Matthew 13, verse 23. And I've highlighted this, but the one, who is the one? I believe in that story, the one is Jesus. The one who received the seed that fell on good soil is the man. Jesus is the man who hears the word and understands it. Jesus was the one who heard the word from his Father. And remember, he said, I don't do anything unless I hear or see my Father do it. And he understood it. He, that is Jesus, produces a crop yielding 100, 60, or 30 times what was sown. Jesus is the man. Jesus is the one. That's where the good soil is. Now, what does that do for us? Well, the good soil, as I've said, is none other than Jesus. Jesus is the one. Jesus is the man. Only Jesus truly and completely hears and understands the word. He produces 100, 60, or 30 times what is sown. Jesus is the hero of the story. Where do we find Jesus now? In this ministry, we often quote John 14:20, and I'll quote it again. John 14:20. On that day, you will realize that I am in my Father, and you are in me, and I am in you. So where's Jesus? He's in you, and you're in him. And that puts us in his Father as well. Others may think others may think that we're stuck in a rut or a path. That's the path. I tend to think of that as a path. Or may be hard-headed. That's the rocky ground. Or have so much going on, that's the thorns and the thistles, that we can't pay attention. Some, and even our own selves, may try to condemn us as totally useless. I'm sure we all have those I am not tapes in our head. Oh, I'm not good. I'm not successful. I'm not wanted. I'm not this. I'm not that. Well, that's kind of self-condemnation. But again, who is in you? Jesus. But Jesus is in us, and in him there's plenty of good soil to ultimately produce good fruit. 100, 60, or 30 times what was sown. You've got that good soil in you. Jesus is there. That's the starting point. Jesus is the good soil where the seed will grow and be productive. Look for Jesus, the good soil, because from his base of operations inside us and inside his Father, and with our consent, because Jesus is never going to violate your free will, then ask him these things. Ask him to identify and break up our non-productive routine paths and then turn them into productive soil. It's interesting that every one of those four soils or three soils that are mentioned in that parable can actually be improved. Think about it. Those hard paths, those routine ruts can be dealt with. And also then ask Jesus to identify, remove, or pulverize our stony places and create good soil. You think about it, where does good soil come from? Well, it's over thousands and millions of years, the rocks have been broken up and turned into powder, turned into soil. And that's where good soil comes from. And so Jesus can remove or pulverize our stony places and create more good soil. Ask Jesus to identify and plow under the weeds. One of the things, I'm a farm kid, grew up on a farm, and we would always, when we got done harvesting, we would always plow it back into the soil, and weeds and all, where the wheat straw or corn stalks and weeds, that would all get plowed under, and it would all rot, and it would improve the soil. I still do some gardening today, and what do you suppose we do with the weeds? Don't throw them in the trash. Put them in a compost pile, because you can transform that into fertilizer. And what does that do? It creates even more good soil. So every one of those three that we look at in that parable that we think of as useless, Jesus, from that starting point in us, that good soil that he is, can transform any one of those and will transform all of those. I think Randy would probably be the first one to tell you from his experiences in life. And I've heard Randy talk about so many of the experiences that he's had in his life. And Randy, just like the rest of us, had a lot of non-productive ruts or routine paths. Randy, just like the rest of us, had a lot of stony places that got broken up. Randy had a lot of weeds in his life, and those things got, how can I say, recycled and made into good soil. That's what's happens, and that's what happens in our life. And who did it? Did Randy do it? No, Jesus did it in Randy, with Randy's cooperation. I think Randy would be the first to tell you that's true. So here's what I wish. This is my wish. I wish for 2026, I suggest we all ask Jesus to help us find the good soil in ourselves. In other words, ask Jesus, are you in me? Find him. Ask him to find the good soil in ourselves and other people we meet. The good soil, that is Jesus, is there in you and in others. And sometimes, we operate under that lie of separation. We don't think Jesus is somewhere. You don't take Jesus anywhere. You and I go and find Jesus is already there. Anyway, Jesus may be hidden to some extent, but he's there. Help Jesus to teach us to learn to look for him in others and in ourselves. Just ask him, teach me that, and he will. This verse in Hebrews 10:25 is often quoted sort of a condemning way. If you've attended church for any length of time at all, you've probably heard this exhortation, because people aren't coming to church. Oh, so let us not give up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but let us encourage one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. Okay? But the verse before it, I think, is the most important one of the two. Verse 25 becomes much easier if verse 24 is done. Verse 24 says, let us consider how we may spur one another on towards love and good deeds. And if that is done in our relationships with one another, if that is done in our churches, I don't think church attendance would be a problem. I think that the churches would be, very well attended. This, I believe, is the good soil environment where genuine growth takes place. That's where I want to be. Let me just say a quick prayer. Our gracious Lord, you are in each and every one listening to this message or watching this message. And I pray that we will all learn to identify you and recognize that you are there. And I pray that all of us will be able to ask you, Lord, are you there? Jesus, are you there? Jesus, help me break down these barriers. All of us want to be productive and fruitful. I know that. And learn to ask you that, Jesus, as I am asking for all of us. In your name, Jesus, we pray. Amen.